Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now, in South Africa, gender-based violence affects practically every part of our lives and is a serious and pervasive issue. Regrettably, the workplace isn't immune from the scourge. Millions of women are employed in environments that are threatening, hostile or disregarding and are often exposed to inappropriate harassment. To discuss this further, I am joined now by Regional Healthcare Manager at NMG Benefits, Michelle Lange. Thank you very much, Michelle, for your time here on eNCA. Of course, we know there's employee assistance programs that employers should have in place, right? But what if sometimes the problem is the employer itself?
Great question. Maseko, thanks very much for having me on the show. Well, look, I think as NMG, we always try to encourage our employer groups to have sound health HR policies in place that address things such as gender-based violence. It's really an important component. They have to have procedures to deal with this from a disciplinary action perspective. And that is critical to address issues within the workplace. Employer assistance programs are also key in terms of addressing issues that are taking place at home. But from an employer perspective, we have to have sound HR policies in place.
All right. So basically, when it comes to these programs, should the employer also offer maybe legal assistance to their employees?
Look, the Employer Assistance Program is a vast program. So it covers aspects such as legal, financial and psychological counseling. So it is all encompassing because we have to realize that these issues are correlated. Often, if you have financial stress at home, it creates a lot of anxiety, pressure, and that can often lead to things such as abuse in the home or, whatever happens in the home. It just takes one little spark, which can lead to devastating consequences. So an employer assistance program offers employees guidance in all of these areas, and they have the expertise to deal with this because often the HR personnel are ill-equipped to deal with some of these, and even line managers are ill-equipped to deal with the severity of these cases. And so it's critical that there is a mechanism where people can get professional guidance in this regard.
What about, for instance, counselling services? Not every employee actually, gives this benefit to their employer, or rather employers give this benefit to their employees. It's not a must, but maybe advisable?
Absolutely. Again, I think most employer assistance programs that you can purchase sort of off the shelf include counselling. So there's varieties that will vary in price. And in terms of benefits, a lot of them will include telephonic counselling. So that's obviously important gateway in terms of getting some access, depending on the severity of the case, that the counsellor will grade the case and then determine whether face-to-face counselling is required. So if you are unable to purchase an employee assistance program, then often people do resort to having a counsellor come on site, perhaps on occasion, and that, I know there's various different elements that corporates can look at. So, you have a separate room where people can come into and see a counsellor, so that you can purchase sort of on a day-to-day basis if you're not interested in purchasing a full employee assistance program. But access to counselling, access to sound advice is really critical, and it's the tools that people need, because if we look at the statistics in South Africa, they are frightening. And when you consider that only 1 in 9 cases are actually reported, then we really are dealing with quite a crisis. And so in order to make sure that we understand that work problems and personal problems are intercorrelated, and if you want an employee that's going to be productive, we must be able to provide them with the tools to either be able to report issues within the workplace or alternatively to have a safe place to talk about issues that are happening at home.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Lastly, what happens in terms of the employer, for example, when there's a harassment case and the harasser, the alleged harasser, is in a more powerful position than the one that is alleging to have been harassed? What then does an employer need to do in that situation without seeming as though they're siding with anyone?
Sure, that's a great question. I think it's really important that there's a space for an employee to report that in a safe environment. So either that can be via the employer assistance program, which will then be alerted back to the employer that there is an issue. Alternatively, again, it does go back to sound HR policies to make sure that there's either a whistleblowing line that can remain anonymous. But ultimately, I would suggest that in those circumstances, you would get an independent legal advisor to come in, as opposed to having any kind of employee representatives and to look at the case independently. That would bring, comfort to both the employee that's experienced the harassment, but we have to address these issues. And the more we speak about them and the more we create this awareness, the more people will feel safe to come forward with these sorts of issues. But I think independence in that regard will be critical. So there are many providers out there, legal advisors that can provide that independent advice.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and for speaking to us there here on eNCA. That was Regional Healthcare Manager at NMG Benefits, Michelle de Lange.